Jake Harrison walked through the halls of the Intergalactic Academy with his head down. Students from dozens of different planets filled the corridors. Some had blue skin, others had 4 arms, and a few could float in the air. But all of them seemed to belong here except Jake. "Watch out, loser coming through," Brad Collins called out as Jake passed by. Brad was tall and strong, the kind of human that made other species respect Earth. His friend Tony Martinez laughed and shook his head. "I still can't believe they let him stay here," Tony said. "He failed the combat test 3 times. My little sister could fight better than him." Jake kept walking. He had heard it all before. Every day was the same. Wake up, go to classes, get laughed at, and go to bed feeling worthless. The worst part was that they were right. Jake was terrible at almost everything the academy taught. In combat class, he could barely lift the training weapons. While other human students like Ryan Cooper and Alex Turner could fight alien creatures twice their size, Jake got knocked down by training robots set to the easiest level. The instructors would sigh and shake their heads when they saw his name on the class list. Language class was no better. The academy taught students how to speak with different alien races. Some aliens talked with colors, others used smell, and a few communicated by changing the temperature of their skin. Jake could barely remember how to say hello in the most basic alien languages. Yesterday, he tried to greet a Vorthan student and accidentally told him that his mother was a space potato. The worst part of each day was lunchtime. Jake would sit alone at a small table in the corner of the huge dining hall. From there, he could see all the other students sitting in groups talking and laughing. The humans usually sat together, but they never invited Jake to join them. "Look at him sitting there like a sad puppy," Danny Rodriguez whispered to his friends. Danny was Jake's roommate, but that did not make them friends. "I asked for a room change, but they said I have to wait until next semester." Jake pushed his food around on his plate. The academy served food from many different worlds, but today he just had simple Earth food. Even that seemed to mock him. He was too human for the aliens and too strange for the other humans. Across the dining hall, Jake could see the Zephyrian students sitting at their own table. They were the most beautiful beings in the academy. Their skin glowed with a soft light, and they moved like they were dancing even when they were just walking. Male students from every species would stare at them with longing eyes. The most beautiful of all was Lyra. She had long silver hair that seemed to float around her head, and her eyes were the color of distant stars. Every guy in the academy had tried to ask her out. Rich alien princes, strong human athletes, and even some of the instructors had tried to win her attention. She said no to all of them with a polite smile that never reached her eyes. Jake had never even tried to talk to her. What would be the point? If she would not date Brad Collins, who was the strongest human in the academy, or Prince Zarion, who would inherit 3 planets, why would she care about Jake Harrison, the biggest failure in school? "Earth boy?" a voice called out. Jake looked up to see Zrath walking toward him. Zrath was from a warrior planet where everyone was born ready to fight. He was 8 feet tall with arms like tree trunks and teeth that could bite through metal. He was also one of the many students who had asked Lyra out and been rejected. "Yes?" Jake said quietly. "I hear you tried to talk to my friend Vexta today," Zrath said. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "You told him his mother was food." "I was trying to say hello," Jake explained. "I got the words mixed up." Zrath laughed, but it was not a nice laugh. "You humans are so weak. You cannot fight, you cannot speak properly, and you smell funny. Why do they even let your species come here?" Other students started to gather around. Jake felt his face turn red. He wanted to stand up and defend himself, but what could he say? Zracht was right about everything. Maybe they keep him here as entertainment, said a student with green skin and too many eyes. Like a pet that does tricks. Or maybe they feel sorry for him, added another. Humans are good at making others feel bad for them. Jake stood up slowly. His hands were shaking, but he tried to keep his voice steady. I belong here just like everyone else. Do you? Zracht stepped closer. Prove it. Show us one thing you can do better than anyone else here. Jake opened his mouth, but no words came out. The truth was, he could not think of a single thing he was good at. He was the worst fighter, the worst student, and the worst example of humanity that the Academy had ever seen. That is what I thought, Zracht said with a nasty grin. You are just a joke, a mistake that should have never left your little planet. The crowd laughed and started to walk away. Jake sat back down and stared at his food. His eyes felt hot and wet, but he would not cry. Not here. Not in front of everyone. From across the dining hall, he felt someone watching him. When he looked up, he saw Lyra staring in his direction. For just a moment, their eyes met. She did not look away or laugh like the others. Instead, she tilted her head slightly like she was studying him. Then she stood up and walked out of the dining hall with her friends. Jake was alone again, just like always. But for some reason, that one look from Lyra made him feel a little less empty inside. Maybe tomorrow would be different. Maybe tomorrow he would find something he was good at. Maybe tomorrow he would prove that he belonged here. But probably not. 3 days later, Jake sat in the back row of Diplomatic Studies class. Professor Blake was teaching them about trade agreements between different planets. Jake tried to pay attention, but the words seemed to float past his ears without sticking. Mr. Harrison, Professor Blake called out suddenly, can you tell us the proper way to greet a crystalline ambassador? Jake felt every eye in the class turn toward him. His face went hot. You? You bow and touch your forehead? That is for Matharian diplomats, Professor Blake said with a tired sigh. Crystalline beings communicate through light patterns. You would flash a blue light 3 times. Kevin Walsh and Marcus Thompson snickered from the front row. Jake sank lower in his chair. After class, the students moved to the Multicultural Commons for a practice exercise. The Commons was a huge room with different sections designed to look like various alien homeworlds. There was a water section for the fish-like Aquarians, a high-gravity zone for the rock people from Titan 7, and even a section that simulated the floating cities of Nimbus Prime. Today you will practice real diplomatic situations, Professor Blake announced. Each team will have students from different species. You must work together to solve trade disputes and cultural problems. Jake found himself grouped with a crystalline student named Flux, an Aquarian called Ripple, and unfortunately, Brad Collins. Brad rolled his eyes when he saw Jake was on his team. Great, Brad muttered. We are going to fail because of the dead weight. Flux flickered with annoyed orange lights. We should focus on the task, not complain about team members. They were given a scenario about a mining dispute between 2 planets. Brad immediately started making aggressive demands, while Flux tried to communicate only through light patterns that half the team could not understand. Ripple just floated in his water tank and said nothing. Jake tried to suggest a compromise, but Brad cut him off. Nobody asked you, failure boy. That was when the alarm started. Red lights flashed throughout the Commons, and a mechanical voice echoed from the speakers. Emergency in Section C gravity generator malfunction. All students evacuate immediately. Students started running toward the exits, but Jake noticed something wrong. In the Nimbus Prime section, where students were supposed to practice floating in low gravity, the gravity generator was going crazy. Instead of the gentle low gravity environment, it was switching rapidly between crushing high gravity and dangerous zero gravity. Most students had already left that section, but Jake saw someone trapped inside. A figure in a silver uniform was caught in a gravity well, unable to move as the forces around them shifted wildly. Every few seconds, they would be pressed flat against the floor, then suddenly lifted into the air and slammed down again. It was Lyra. "Someone is still in there!" Jake shouted, but the other students were too busy running to safety to hear him. Jake looked around desperately. The emergency teams would take at least 10 minutes to arrive, and Lyra might not survive that long. The gravity fluctuations were getting worse, and he could see sparks flying from the control panels. While Brad and the others ran for the exits, Jake ran toward the maintenance closet. His hands shook as he pulled out tools and spare parts. Everyone always laughed at him for reading old Earth engineering manuals, but now that useless knowledge might save someone's life. The gravity generator was an advanced alien design, but Jake had spent countless nights studying how different technologies worked. He had read about every type of engine, computer, and life support system used in the galaxy. Not because he had to, but because he was curious about how things worked. Jake crawled under the control panel while gravity waves crashed around him. Sometimes he felt like he weighed 1,000 pounds. Other times he floated helplessly in the air. But he kept working, connecting wires and rerouting power through old Earth backup systems that most people had forgotten about. "Come on," he whispered to himself as he twisted 2 wires together. "Work, please work." The gravity fluctuations slowed down. Jake grabbed an old radio from the emergency kit and rigged it to send a signal to the gravity generator. It was not pretty, and any real engineer would probably laugh at his makeshift solution, but it worked. He created a stable corridor of normal gravity leading from Lyra's position to the exit. It was narrow and would not last long, but it might be enough. Jake ran into the dangerous zone, fighting against the wild gravity changes. When he reached Lyra, she was barely conscious. Her usually glowing skin was dim, and her silver hair was tangled and dull. "Can you move?" Jake asked, reaching out his hand. Lyra looked up at him with surprise. Her star-colored eyes went wide. "Jake, what are you doing here?" "Getting you out," he said simply. She took his hand, and Jake helped pull her to her feet. Together they moved carefully through the stable gravity corridor Jake had created. Each step was dangerous because the safe zone was only a few feet wide. "How did you do this?" Lyra asked as they walked. "Old Earth stuff," Jake said, not wanting to explain. "Everyone says it is junk, but it works." They made it to safety just as Jake's makeshift repair gave out. Behind them, the gravity generator sparked and finally shut down completely. Emergency teams rushed past them into the commons. Lyra stood beside Jake, both of them breathing hard. Her glow was starting to return, and her hair began to float around her head again. She looked at him with an expression he had never seen before. "You saved my life," she said softly. Jake shrugged. Anyone would have done the same thing. "No," Lyra said, and for the first time since he had known her, she smiled. It was not the polite smile she gave to other students. This smile was real and warm. Not everyone would have thought to use old Earth technology. Not everyone would have risked their life for someone they barely know. Jake felt his face turn red again, but this time it was not from embarrassment. "Jake Harrison," Lyra said, reaching out and taking his hand again. The touch sent electricity up his arm. I think I have been wrong about humans. She gave him a look that made his heart beat faster, then smiled that mysterious smile that had driven half the academy crazy. But this time, it was meant for him. Professor Blake and the emergency teams arrived to check on everyone. When they saw Jake's repair work, they looked amazed. "Incredible," Professor Blake muttered, examining the makeshift gravity corridor. "This is completely against regulation, but it actually works. Who did this?" "Jake did," Lyra said proudly, still holding his hand. "He saved my life." Jake looked around and realized that students were staring at them. Not just staring at the broken equipment or the emergency teams, they were staring at him and Lyra, standing together, holding hands. Brad Collins stood in the doorway with his mouth hanging open. Danny Rodriguez looked like he had seen a ghost. Even some of the alien students seemed surprised, but Jake did not care about any of them. For the first time in his life, someone was looking at him like he mattered. Someone was holding his hand and smiling at him like he was worth something. Maybe he was not the strongest or the smartest student at the academy. Maybe he would never be the best fighter or the greatest diplomat. But today, when it really mattered, he had been exactly what was needed. And Lyra had noticed. The next morning, Jake woke up thinking he had dreamed everything. But when he walked into the dining hall for breakfast, every conversation stopped. Students stared at him with wide eyes and whispered to each other. "Is that really him?" A blue-skinned girl asked her friend. "The one who saved the Zephyrian princess?" her friend whispered back. Jake sat down at his usual table in the corner, but this time he was not alone for long. Pete Anderson and Chris Miller, two human students who had never spoken to him before, walked over with their breakfast trays. "Mind if we sit here?" Pete asked. Jake was so surprised he almost dropped his fork. "Sure, I guess. That was really something yesterday," Chris said as he sat down. "I heard you used some kind of old Earth tech to fix the gravity generator." "It was not really a fix," Jake said quietly. "Just a temporary patch using radio signals and backup power." "Still," Pete said, "nobody else thought of that. Even the emergency teams were impressed." Across the dining hall, Jake could see his usual tormentors looking confused. Brad Collins kept glancing over at Jake's table, his face twisted with jealousy. Tony Martinez was arguing with someone about what had really happened yesterday. "There she is," Chris whispered. Jake looked up to see Lyra entering the dining hall with her Zephyrian friends. Her silver hair caught the light as she moved, and her skin glowed with its usual soft radiance. But instead of going to the Zephyrian table, like always, she walked straight toward Jake. The entire dining hall went silent. "Good morning, Jake," Lyra said with that warm smile he was still getting used to. "May I sit with you?" Jake nodded, not trusting his voice to work properly. Lyra gracefully sat down next to him, her presence making the air around them seem to shimmer slightly. "How are you feeling today?" Jake asked, trying to sound normal. "Much better, thanks to you," she said. "The medical bay said I could have been seriously hurt if I had stayed trapped much longer." Pete and Chris stared with their mouths open. From other tables, Jake could hear urgent whispers and see students pointing in their direction. Some were taking pictures with their communication devices. "I was hoping we could talk more," Lyra continued, "about what you did yesterday and about other things." "Other things?" Jake asked. Lyra's eyes sparkled with amusement. "Would you like to take a walk with me after breakfast? There is something I want to show you." Jake nodded again, still not quite believing this was really happening. An hour later, Jake found himself walking through the Academy's observation deck with the most beautiful being in the school. Through the huge windows, they could see stars and distant planets floating in the darkness of space. "Do you know much about Zephyrian culture?" Lyra asked as they walked. "Not really," Jake admitted. "I am terrible at the cultural studies classes." Lyra laughed, and the sound was like music. "That is because you are being taught the wrong things. Most species think they understand us because we are beautiful and seem perfect. They think we care about strength or wealth or status." "You do not?" Jake asked. "Not the way others think we do," Lyra said. She stopped walking and turned to face him. "My people value something much more rare than physical strength or social position. We value creativity, kindness, and the ability to see solutions where others see only problems." Jake felt confused. "But I am not creative. I just used some old equipment that was lying around." "That is exactly what I mean," Lyra said, her eyes bright with excitement. "Yesterday, when everyone else was running away or standing around helplessly, you saw possibilities. You looked at broken equipment and spare parts and imagined how they could work together in a new way." She reached out and took his hand again, sending that same electric feeling up his arm. "You have been thinking you are a failure because you cannot do what other students do," Lyra continued. "But you have never tried to do things your own way. You have been trying to be like Brad Collins or Tony Martinez when you should be trying to be like Jake Harrison." "But Jake Harrison is not good at anything," he said sadly. "That is not true," Lyra said firmly. "Jake Harrison reads engineering manuals for fun. Jake Harrison notices when someone needs help and acts without thinking about his own safety. Jake Harrison can take 3 broken pieces of technology and make them work together in a way that saves lives." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, looking out at the stars. Jake felt something changing inside him, like a door opening in his mind. "Can I ask you something?" Jake said finally. "Of course. Why did you say no to all those other guys? They are stronger than me, richer than me, better looking than me." Lyra smiled that mysterious smile again. "Because they all tried to impress me with things I do not care about. They showed off their muscles or their money or their fighting skills. They treated me like a prize to be won instead of a person to be understood." "What do you care about?" Jake asked. "I care about someone who would risk their life for a stranger. I care about someone who thinks old human engineering is fascinating instead of embarrassing. I care about someone who sees the best in others even when they cannot see it in themselves." Jake felt his heart beating faster. "Are you saying—" I'm saying that you are the first person in this academy who has ever interested me," Lyra said. "Not because of what you can do in a fight or how much money your family has, but because of who you are inside." They had reached the end of the observation deck. In front of them was a small alcove with benches where students could sit and study. It was usually empty because most students preferred the busier common areas. "There is something else," Lyra said as they sat down. "Something I have not told anyone else at this academy." "What is it?" Lyra looked out at the stars for a long moment. "My people have been watching humanity for a long time. We have been trying to decide if your species is ready to join the Galactic Council." Jake stared at her. "The Galactic Council? But humans are already part of the galaxy. We have been for decades." "You are part of the galaxy," Lyra agreed. "But the Council is different. It is made up of the oldest and wisest species. They make Decisions that affect entire star systems. Only species that have proven themselves worthy are invited to join. And you have been testing us? Not testing exactly, Lyra said. Observing, learning, trying to understand what makes humans special. What makes us special? Jake asked. Lyra turned to look at him directly. Yesterday I found out. When you saved me, you did not do it because you wanted something from me. You did not do it to show off or to prove how strong you were. You did it because it was the right thing to do, and you found a way to make it work even when it seemed impossible. Anyone would have done the same thing, Jake said. No, Lyra said softly. They would not have. That is what makes you special. That is what makes humanity special. You do not just survive or conquer or accumulate wealth. You help each other. You innovate. You turn your weaknesses into strengths. Jake felt overwhelmed. But I am just one person. I am not even a good example of humanity. You are a perfect example, Lyra said. You are exactly what we have been hoping to find. She stood up and pulled him to his feet. Come on. There are some people I want you to meet. Who? Lyra smiled. That mysterious smile one more time. The other observers. It is time for the real test to begin. News of Jake and Lyra spending time together spread through the academy like wildfire. By the third day, Jake could not walk anywhere without students whispering and pointing. Some looked curious, others seemed angry, and a few appeared genuinely confused. The worst reaction came from Zrakth. Jake was leaving his advanced physics class when the massive alien appeared in the hallway, blocking his path. Behind Zrakth stood several other warrior species students, all looking ready for a fight. Earthworm, Zrakth growled, his voice echoing off the metal walls. We need to talk. Other students quickly moved out of the way, forming a circle around them. Jake felt his heart start racing, but he tried to keep his voice steady. What do you want, Zrakth? I want to know what trick you used on the Zephyrian female, Zrakth said, taking a step closer. No one believes you actually saved her. You must have done something sneaky, something weak and human. I did not trick anyone, Jake said. I just helped when she needed help. Zrakth laughed, but it sounded like rocks falling down a mountain. Help? You? The weakest creature in this academy? I think you are lying. More students gathered around them. Jake could see Danny Rodriguez watching from the back of the crowd, along with Steve Wilson and Matt Phillips. None of them looked like they planned to help if things went bad. Lyra is too good for you, Zrakth continued. She belongs with a real warrior, not a pathetic little worm who hides behind machines. That is not your choice to make, Jake said, surprised by his own boldness. Zrakth's eyes went wide with rage. Did you just challenge me, human? No, I just said. You challenged me, Zrakth roared. I heard it. Everyone heard it. You think you can take what belongs to a warrior? The crowd pressed closer. Jake could see excitement in their eyes. They wanted to see a fight, even if it would be completely one-sided. Lyra does not belong to anyone, Jake said firmly. She makes her own choices. Then let her choose, Zrakth said with a cruel smile. I challenge you to a combat trial. If you win, I will leave you both alone. If I win, you stay away from her forever. The crowd erupted in excited whispers. Combat trials were serious business at the academy. They were formal duels that followed ancient rules and could not be refused without losing all honor. I accept the challenge, said a clear voice from behind the crowd. Everyone turned to see Lyra pushing through the circle of students. Her skin was glowing brighter than usual, and her eyes flashed with anger. "You cannot accept for him," Zrath said. "The worm must speak for himself." Lyra walked to Jake's side and took his hand. "Jake can make his own decisions, but I want everyone here to understand something. I am not a prize to be won. I am not property to be claimed. I choose who I spend time with, and I choose Jake." "Pretty words," Zrath said. "But words mean nothing. Only strength matters. Only victory matters." Jake felt everyone's eyes on him. He could accept the challenge and probably get beaten badly in front of the whole school. Or he could refuse and prove that he really was the coward everyone thought he was. "When and where?" Jake asked quietly. Zrath grinned, showing his metal teeth. "Tomorrow at sunset. The main combat arena. Traditional rules. No weapons, no outside help. Fight until one yields or cannot continue." "Jake, you do not have to do this," Lyra whispered. "Yes, I do," Jake said. He looked up at Zrath. "I accept your challenge." The crowd cheered and began to break up. Students were already pulling out their communication devices to spread the news. By dinner time, everyone in the academy would know about the fight. Zrath laughed one more time before walking away. "Enjoy your last night with her, human. Tomorrow you learn what real strength looks like." When they were alone, Lyra turned to Jake with worry in her star-colored eyes. "You cannot fight him," she said. "He is twice your size and trained for combat since birth. His people consider fighting an art form." "I know," Jake said, "but I could not let him talk about you like that. Like you were just a thing to be owned." Lyra's expression softened. "That is very sweet, but sweetness will not protect you from his claws. We need to find another way." "There is no other way," Jake said. "I gave my word. If I back out now, everyone will know I am a coward." "I already know you are not a coward," Lyra said. "You proved that when you saved my life. But everyone else will think I am." Lyra was quiet for a long moment. "There might be something," she said finally. "The combat trial rules are very old, from a time when all fights were simple physical contests. But the rules do not actually specify how you must fight." "What do you mean?" "I mean that victory conditions are fight until one yields or cannot." "Continue." "It does not say you must use your fists or that you must hurt your opponent." Jake thought about this. "So I could win without actually fighting?" "Possibly," Lyra said. "If you can find another way to make him yield or become unable to continue." "Any ideas?" Lyra smiled mysteriously. "Actually, yes. But it will require you to do something that goes against everything this academy teaches about combat." "What is that?" "You will have to be yourself," Lyra said. "The real Jake Harrison. Not the Jake who tries to copy other students, but the Jake who reads engineering, manuals for fun, and talks to people like they matter." Jake felt confused. "How will that help me win a fight?" "Trust me," Lyra said, "and more importantly, trust yourself. You have something that Zrath does not have, something that most people in this academy do not understand." "What is that?" "You care about people," Lyra said simply. "Even people who are mean to you, even people who seem like your enemies. That is your real strength, Jake. Tomorrow, you need to use it." That night, Jake lay in his bed staring at the ceiling. Danny Rodriguez was snoring loudly in the next bunk, having spent the evening telling Jake all the ways Zrath was going to destroy him. I heard he once broke a practice dummy with his bare hands, Danny had said, and that was when he was just warming up. Jake tried not to think about metal teeth and claws. Instead, he thought about what Lyra had said. Care about people. Use that as strength. But how could caring about someone help you win a fight? Tomorrow he would find out. Tomorrow he would either prove that humans belonged in the galaxy, or he would prove that everyone had been right about him all along. Either way, by tomorrow night, everything would be different. The main combat arena was packed. Jake had never seen so many students in one place before. Every seat was filled, and more students stood along the walls. Even some instructors had come to watch, including Professor Blake and Commander Hayes. Jake stood in the center of the arena wearing simple training clothes. Across from him, Zrakth looked like a mountain of muscle and metal. The alien warrior was stretching his arms and flexing his claws, making sure everyone could see how dangerous he was. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced the arena's computer voice, "this is a formal combat trial between Cadet Zrakth of Warrior Prime and Cadet Jake Harrison of Earth. Standard rules apply. The contest ends when one participant yields or becomes unable to continue." Jake looked up into the crowd and found Lyra sitting in the front row. She gave him a small nod and that mysterious smile he had come to love. Somehow her confidence in him made him feel a little less terrified. "You sure you want to do this, Earthworm?" Zrakth called out. "You can still run away. I might let you keep most of your teeth." The crowd laughed. Jake could see Danny Rodriguez shaking his head sadly, and Brad Collins looked like he was enjoying the show already. "I am sure," Jake said. "Begin," the computer announced. Zrakth charged forward like a freight train, his claws extended and his metal teeth gleaming. Jake barely managed to dodge to the side, feeling the wind from Zrakth's massive arm as it swept past his head. The crowd cheered as Zrakth spun around and attacked again. This time, Jake was not quick enough. Zrakth's hand caught him in the chest and sent him flying across the arena floor. Jake rolled and came up gasping for breath. "Is that all you have?" Zrakth taunted. "My little sister fights better than you." Jake stood up slowly, his chest aching where Zrakth had hit him. The alien warrior was right. Jake could not win this. Fight with strength or speed. He needed to try something else. "Tell me about your sister," Jake said. Zrakth stopped advancing, looking confused. "What?" "Your sister," Jake repeated, staying just out of reach. "You mentioned her. What is she like?" "What kind of trick is this?" Zrakth demanded. "No trick," Jake said honestly. "I am just curious. Do you have family back home?" The crowd started, murmuring. This was not how combat trials usually went. Warriors were supposed to fight, not chat about their families. "Of course I have family," Zrakth said suspiciously. "Why do you care?" "Because I have never met anyone from your planet before," Jake said. "I read that Warrior Prime has some of the most beautiful mountain ranges in the galaxy. Is that true?" Zrakth's aggressive posture relaxed slightly. "The crystal peaks are magnificent. They rise so high you can see 3 moons from the summit." "That sounds amazing," Jake said with genuine interest. "Do you miss them?" "Every day," Zrakth said, then caught himself. "Why are we talking about this? We are supposed to be fighting," he charged again, but this time his heart did not seem to be in it. Jake dodged more easily and continued talking. "I miss Earth, too," Jake said, "especially the rain. Does it rain on Warrior Prime?" "Rain?" Zrakth stopped his attack completely. "We have storms that shake the mountains. The sound echoes through the valleys like the voices of our ancestors." "That sounds beautiful," Jake said. Do you write to your family often? Zrakh's fierce expression began to soften. My sister sends me pictures of the storms. She says they remind her of me, loud and impossible to ignore. The crowd was getting restless. This was not the violent spectacle they had come to see. Some students started booing, demanding that the fighters actually fight. Why did you come to the academy? Jake asked, ignoring the crowd. Someone as strong as you could have stayed home and been a great warrior there. My father wanted me to learn about other cultures, Zrakh said. He said that the greatest warriors understand their enemies, not just how to defeat them. That is very wise, Jake said. Your father sounds like a smart man. He is the wisest leader our people have ever had, Zrakh said with obvious pride. He ended 3 wars without fighting, just by talking to people and understanding what they really wanted. Just like you are doing now, Jake pointed out. Zrakh looked around the arena as if seeing it for the first time. The crowd was getting louder, demanding action. Some students were throwing empty cups and yelling insults. I do not understand, Zrakh said slowly. Why are you not afraid of me? I am afraid, Jake admitted. You could break me in half without trying. But you are also homesick and you miss your family and you want to make your father proud. That makes you a person, not just a monster. Zrakh stared at him for a long moment. No one has ever talked to me like that before. Like what? Like I matter, Zrakh said quietly. Like I am more than just my strength. The crowd was getting angry now. Students were standing up and shouting for them to fight properly. But Jake kept his attention focused on Zrakh. You do matter, Jake said. Everyone matters. That is what I think anyway. Even weak humans who cannot fight? Zrakh asked, with what might have been a smile. Especially them, Jake said, because they have to find other ways to solve problems, like talking to people and trying to understand them. Zrakh nodded slowly. My father would like you, I think. I would like to meet him someday, Jake said. Perhaps you will, Zrakh said. Then he did something that shocked everyone in the arena. He sat down on the floor, cross-legged, and looked up at Jake with respect in his eyes. I yield, he said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. The arena went silent. Students stared in disbelief. Even the instructors looked confused. You... what? Jake asked. I yield, Zrakh repeated. You have won this combat trial, Jake Harrison of Earth. But I did not defeat you, Jake protested. Zrakh smiled, and it was a genuine smile, not his usual cruel grin. Yes, you did. You defeated my anger. You defeated my need to prove my strength. You showed me something I had forgotten. What is that? That the strongest warriors are the ones who can make friends out of enemies, Zrakh said. You fought me without weapons, without violence, without hate. You fought me with curiosity and kindness. I have never seen anything like it. He stood up and extended his massive hand to Jake. I am honored to call you friend, Jake Harrison. Jake shook the offered hand, still not quite believing what had happened. Around them, the arena erupted in confused chatter. Some students cheered, others argued about whether this counted as a real victory. But Jake did not care about any of them. He looked up into the crowd and saw Lyra standing and clapping, her face glowing with pride and joy. Next to her, other Zephyrian students were also standing and applauding. Then something even more surprising happened. Professor Blake stood up and began clapping too. Commander Hayes joined him, then other instructors. Soon, nearly half the arena was on their feet, giving Jake the kind of ovation usually reserved for graduation ceremonies. "Attention, students and faculty," came a new voice over the arena's speakers. It was Admiral Chen, the head of the entire academy. She walked onto the arena floor with a group of officers Jake did not recognize. "What we have just witnessed," Admiral Chen announced, "is exactly the kind of leadership and innovation that makes humanity valuable to the galactic community. Cadet Harrison has demonstrated that strength comes in many forms, and that sometimes the greatest victory is the one that makes everyone stronger." She turned to Jake with a smile. "Cadet Harrison, please report to my office tomorrow morning. There are some people who would like to meet you." As the crowd began to disperse, Lyra ran down from the stands and threw her arms around Jake. Her skin was glowing so brightly that they were both surrounded by soft silver light. "I knew you could do it," she whispered in his ear. "Do what?" Jake asked, still confused by everything that had happened. "Be yourself," she said, pulling back to look at him. "The real Jake Harrison, the one who cares more about understanding people than defeating them." Zrath walked over to them, no longer, looking like a fierce warrior but more like a big, friendly giant. "Jake," he said, "would you like to sit with me at dinner tonight? I would like to hear more about Earth, and I can tell you about the Crystal Peaks." "I would like that," Jake said with a smile. As they walked out of the arena together, Jake realized that everything had changed, not just for him, but for everyone. Students who had never spoken to him before were nodding respectfully as he passed. Even Brad Collins looked at him with something that might have been admiration. But the best part was Lyra's hand in his, and the knowledge that he had finally found his place in the galaxy. Not as the strongest fighter or the smartest student, but as someone who could see the good in others and help them see it in themselves. Tomorrow he would meet with Admiral Chen and learn what came next. Tonight, he would have dinner with his new friend Zrath and the woman who had believed in him when no one else would. For the first time in his life, Jake Harrison felt like he truly belonged somewhere, and it felt amazing.